Okay, awesome. Welcome back. I see a lot of people from different countries in Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Eswatini, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Burundi. I see you there. We're glad you here with us. So the next speaker in line is Patrick Drexler, who is currently a head of business development from NetHome, which is also based in Germany. So Patrick has vast amount of experience coming also from the financial services. He will be sharing with us the importance of insight that we generate from our users. Thank you. I'll just hand over to you, Patrick, to take us through that.
Right. Thank you very much, Kutsu, for introducing me. So hi everyone. Absolute pleasure to be here. As Kutsu was already mentioning, my name is Patrick Drexler. I'm head of business development at Nethone for approximately 1.5 years now. My background is very much in financial industry, primarily banking and payments industry. I've been working there for a little more than 10 years prior to joining Nethone. I'm based in Germany. Our headquarters actually of Nethone are in Warsaw in Poland. However, due to the COVID pandemic, we do not necessarily have only one central place for the company. So we do have our headquarters in Poland, but we're pretty much spread all around the world. Meaning we have offices on different continents, including South Africa, in Asia, in different places, in Japan, for example, in Singapore, but also various among Europe. So we consider ourselves actually as a very global company, but still the home country, the official home country is Poland, and obviously the European Union is where we're from. So what I will be talking about today, and what I will be presenting to you today is basically the how you can actually create a fully frictionless and safe customer journey by actually knowing your user 360 degree, and in this way actually preventing account takeover fraud. I'll go on the first slide if that works. Second. Okay. So as I mentioned, Nethone is pretty global. At the moment, or maybe let me start with this. We are around for approximately 5 years as a fraud prevention company. We have initially started in the travel and financial industry, meaning that due to the nature of our clients actually from day one, and as I said, that was approximately 4 to 5 years ago, we have seen traffic from all around the globe. In particular, travel companies have traffic from everywhere. Also, depending on the financial sector, if it's, for example, a payment provider, it can also be very global traffic. So actually, from a very early stage, we've already seen that our solution, that we have seen with our solution global traffic. And we actually saw that no matter where the traffic came from, the solution was actually working and performing in a very similar manner. At the moment, if I'm not fully mistaken, we are seeing traffic and monitoring traffic from approximately 140 countries worldwide. So that's a lot, and we really operate and offer services in pretty much every region of the world. Some of our clients are listed on this slide here. Primarily, we are aiming at 3 sectors. We are aiming at the banking and financial services sector. We are aiming at e-commerce, and we are aiming at the travel sector as a solution. Clients of ours are banks like ING, for example, in Europe, Bank Polski, which is actually the second largest bank of Poland, for example. But we also work with large international companies, security companies like Thales. So pretty big portfolio of clients by now. So what's the problem actually with ATO fraud? As the speakers before me were already mentioning, fraudsters are not sleeping, and actually the type of fraud that is happening today is very sophisticated. and most of the actual fraudsters are actually really experts in their fields. So it is actually quite easy to get around current forms of protection when it comes to account protection, in particular in the banking sector. So typical technologies that would actually be used for this purpose would be things like IP and geolocation checks, basic cookie identification, would be a very basic type of device fingerprinting. Almost everybody does this, but usually only to a very limited extent. Would be logics based on certain events or signals, or the analysis actually of a user's device. How can you get around these systems? Fraudsters do know. They would steal cookies. They would do domain phishing. They would do credential stuffing. And there are obviously different techniques of social engineering to get around these systems. Since many of these systems, in particular, again, in the banking sector, and I'm not referring to any particular geography here because we see this all around the globe, whether it's Brazil, whether it's US, whether that is South Africa, or whether that is Poland, it is pretty much the same. Many of the banks actually either have in-house systems or are based actually on legacy systems that they've been using for several years. So everybody who has actually been working with these tools or who had to do with these tools knows how to circumvent them. Right. So the problem here is obviously an insufficient protection, actually, from account takeover. Eventually, there are some very simple or some very old-fashioned mechanisms which create a friction for the customer, and depending on how obviously the system is set up, it can either result indirectly in money loss for the client, or it would obviously harm the reputation of the attacked or affected bank. So as we are also a European company, there is a regulation for strong customer authentication in the European Union, meaning that you have to basically prove that you do perform certain security measures and certain security checks in order to lock fraudsters out of your account or from a payment attempt. So usually the situation that the bank has is something that the user knows. So meaning the bank would rely on information that is actually provided by the user or that is known by the user. So that could be a password, that could be a PIN, or maybe a swiping path that has been memorized. But this is what is currently there. In addition to that, what you would actually need to have, according to this regulation, but also obviously this regulation was made in mind with actually the reason that this would actually make total sense and that this is really required, because fraudsters are actually not struggling to really get around this, is that you would also be able to provide something that the user actually has and that the user is. So that's a basic requirement, and everybody should actually think about having this type of information in order to make sure that you provide a minimum or a sophisticated standard of security actually in order to protect an account. So how can we help there? We would be basically able to provide you with insights on who a user is by checking characteristics of a GPU, for example, by actually detecting a mobile device, for example, that is in use, or a device in general. It can also be a computer. We would be able to check certain characteristics of a hardware device. So we would know what the user has. How would we know what the user is? We actually have invested a lot of time and a lot of money into, on top of what we do, and I will get to this on the next page in detail, in behavioral analytics. So we refer to this as passive biometrics, meaning that by the way we look at the behavior of a customer, we would actually be able to tell you who is the customer and have we seen this customer before. So that is an essential part. We do this on desktop devices, we do this on mobile devices. So we would be able to detect certain behavior, whether you're using a touch screen, whether you're using a clipboard or whether you're using your keyboard or your mouse. That doesn't really matter. We are basically able to identify an individual to a certain extent by actually monitoring this and gathering this information. In addition to that, obviously, we would have additional information to protect and to be able to to enhance the security. Some of the examples are mentioned here on the slide. For example, the usage of a VPN network or Tor usage. Obviously, those would be obvious things, but our solution would actually allow you to be able to differentiate between different types of VPN connections. So if it's a private VPN connection or if it's a corporate VPN connection. So we are actually going into very much detail there when looking at an entire user session. I need to hurry up. I'm talking too much. So what do we collect? As I said, we do collect behavioral data. I will go a bit more into detail on this on the next slide. And in addition to that, we do a very heavy device fingerprinting and very granular. So we do look at network intelligence that we have, obviously IP geolocation I was referring to in the beginning, which many do, but we actually try to match the IP geolocation information that we have with the connection that we see from a device. For example, if it's a Wi-Fi connection or there is a GSM connection of a phone, we would try actually to match if the person is actually where the person claims to be. We would be able to detect things like GPS spoofing, but we would also see if there is a VPN or proxy used or any other anomalies related to the connection. And on top of this, and there we are actually reverse engineering many tools that fraudsters are using, but also many tools that developers are using in order to develop, for example, games for a browser or for a mobile phone. We would actually reverse engineer and use this knowledge and these insights to check on characteristics of a GPU, for example, in a device. Again, I mentioned this on the slide before, but why do I mention it? We can tell you how many cores a device has. We can tell you how many cores are being in use, for example, of a device. So we would be able to see, for example, mobile device would in average have more cores. So we would be able to see this. If somebody is claiming to have a certain device, we would see if it's a desktop device because it has less cores, but we would also see how many cores were in use. So meaning, is a device, for example, logged into different sessions? So are particular cores associated to different sessions? And we look at this, and this way we would, for example, be able to detect botnets, but in the same way we would also be able to detect, for example, virtual machines. Also, our solution would actually allow you, and that's something also that's very much on the rise, remote desktop attacks. So in terms of behavioral analysis, here is an example of what we do, and this is also something that we show in our backend to our customers. We basically analyze the keystroke dynamics of an individual, meaning by the way somebody is pressing certain buttons or by the way somebody is typing. We would actually be able to, a certain extent, see if this is a legit individual, and if it is a legit individual, is it an individual that we have seen before? We would look at things like flight time, so meaning moving your finger from one button to another, how long you press a button, but we would also look at things like mouse movements, and as I was mentioning, at finger swipes, is there a clipboard usage, and similar things. In this way, only relating to behavioral data, we would actually already be able to catch a quite significant amount of potential fraudsters. But sessions are usually it's very important for us to have several sessions of a user. So if you want to be sure that somebody is actually the same user based on the behavior, leaving aside the other information that we collect, we would usually require 5 sessions where we see a user in order to be able to recognize this client again with a very high probability of above 90%, meaning after we have seen a user 5 times, that wouldn't be too often. For example, if we're talking about the bank account login, we would actually be able to know if it is the same user or not. So we would not only be able to tell you if it's a fraudster or not, but we would actually be able to tell you if it's the same user or not. So this is what I was mentioning. We do provide insights on everything that we do. So all the information that I was referring to or that I was mentioning to you is information that a client of ours would receive via API, but they would also have access to this information via our so-called panel. So that's basically our backend, where our customers would see would gain insights on all these sessions and would understand the connection between different sessions. I will not go into further detail into this. For this, the time is too limited. That would take me another 1.5 hours. But just for you to have heard it, there is also a possibility to have demo access to such thing in order to get a better understanding of how in detail this solution works. So what do we do? Our solution is a machine learning-based fraud prevention solution. And for this purpose, we have a cloud service where we have deployed models, and we custom build machine learning models for all of our clients. Why do we do this? We do this because the behavior and the traffic on particular clients can vary a lot, not only on the geography, but also on the nature of the business, or maybe also the nature of the product offering. So what do? We collect with these models, we via our profiler. Our profiler is a JavaScript or actually part of an app. It can also be integrated via SDK in Android or iOS, where our profile is integrated, or on the desktop device, it's a JavaScript, where we collect this information. We feed this into our models, together with the data that we receive from a bank, potentially. That can be limited, of course, the amount of data we receive, or we don't receive any data at all. That will depend. And we can also feed our models with external data, meaning we could also use different external data providers, or, for example, address verification services, email verification services, whatever there might be. It can also be input that actually comes from us. Just to have mentioned it as well, we have a dedicated darknet team, which does nothing else but collect information around new fraud techniques and information on fraud cases on our existing and future customers, in order to feed our knowledge and our models with this information, and obviously let this influence the decision making and the recommendations that we give out. And it also allows us, obviously, to eventually already anticipate new fraud patterns that we would see from new types of attack that we are observing on the darknet. So what are the benefits of such a solution? Quite obviously, the solution works entirely in the background. The user will not be affected. The user will not see it. We give you a recommendation in real time, whether the user is legit or not. And you have a completely seamless experience. In case of doubt, we also give you flexibility. So let's say we are in doubt about a customer, essentially, because there is something that is not entirely clear to us. We cannot give you a clear-cut recommendation. We would allow you to, for example, trigger 2-factor authentication or 3-factor authentication based on the result that we do. We are very flexible there, and we basically adapt to the needs of the clients. And it really depends on what the client wants, but we are completely adaptive to this, and our technology allows you actually to customize this. So how does it work? I explained this on a high level already. The NetHome Profiler is integrated on the banking service somewhere, where we see the customer. This can either be before login or after login. So we could also monitor a potential fraudster during an actual active session. That depends again on how the bank or the financial player is targeting this. We would have client data, we would have user device data, and we would have behavioral data. plus the external data that I was referring to. All this information would be fed into our infrastructure and our models. This is where we create this overview on what we have been observing. We convert all these thousands of attributes that we see into human readable signs. And we give you a clear-cut recommendation on what to do with this interaction, meaning this login attempt in a particular case. So we would say this is a legit customer, this is not a legit customer, or eventually there is a doubt. It looks very suspicious, but it's not 100% fraud. So we would actually recommend you to trigger some other form of authentication on top. And if you don't want this, we can also only get the clear-cut recommendation. Again, this really depends. It's a case-by-case scenario that would have to be looked at in detail. Data protection. As we are a EU company, and if some of you are familiar with the GDPR regulations, to a certain extent, we take GDPR and data protection very serious. As I told you, we are compliant with data protection legislations almost all around the globe per default, with small adaptations because the GDPR is very, very strict in Europe. None of our data is actually currently leaving the EU. Everything is stored on AWS, actually, in Ireland and in Germany. Yeah, all the data is there. Nothing is, for example, going to the US. Nothing is going to other countries outside of the EU at the moment. It's stored there. We are not the data controller. The bank will remain the data controller. We're just the data processor. That's very important as well. So thank you very much. I think I finished on time, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, should be 20 minutes. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I think we can jump to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I think what we're going to do, if the team could also consolidate some of the questions that they have to the presenters. We have about 30 minutes at the end of our day, really dedicated to Q&A. So yeah, but there's just one announcement that I just want to make to the team is that after every speaker that we have on board today, we'll take about a minute break so that we can switch from one speaker to the next speaker, and for us to have that seamless transition that we need to have. Thank you, Patrick. We really appreciate your time and sharing with us some of the projects that you're working on. You're working on when it comes to the banking sector. So we really appreciate your time and the knowledge that you were sharing with us.
Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Patrick.
I'll get out. No worries.